Hello, my name is Rob Garner. I'm a software development instructor, and today I'm going to demonstrate how to add student pages to our .NET MAUI database application. So we're going to add a student model class, a repo. We're going to make sure that we are creating the student table in the database. And then we're going to create a page for editing one student and a page for listing multiple students. And then add the page to the navigation. One of the things that we're going to see in this is that we are going to be using relational data, which means that we have a student table that will have a major ID that points to a major that the student has. So this is a one-to-one relationship. So every student has one major. Arguably, actually, this is in the other direction, a many-to-one. So each major could have multiple students. So this would be a one. I suppose this would be a many-to-one relationship in here. So here we are in our application as it currently stands. If we run this, let's take a look. And right now we have campuses, course, and majors, and these were relatively simple tables, and we made a user interface to be able to insert, update, and delete in these. And we're going to add some students pages here. So first thing we need is a model to represent our students. So we're going to add a new class, and we're going to call it student. And we're going to add this, we're going to make a student class. And so this student class is going to have an ID field. Because this is in the database, it needs to have an ID field. It will have the student will have a first name, a last name, and a student number. And then this is where that relational database piece comes in. We're going to have an ID field. And actually, this is the only data that we're going to have in the database. We're going to have a field here, sometimes called a navigation property, which will allow us to, if we want to store a reference to the actual major, we can here, but we're just going to store the ID field in the database. And then we're going to have a couple constructors to make it easier to construct this object, and then a toString, which will just take the first name, last name, and then the major here. Now, one of the notes here is it does give us a warning that there could be null, so we can put this null reference exception. If we don't have a major, it'll just be null. We could also do this. If it's null, we could just say TBD. The next thing we need to make sure that our database service has, when it gets created, has a table for our student class. So if we look at this, we have this initialize database method, and we can put that in here. So we will add a table definition inside of our creation code here. And I think I want to do this. And so this will create the table, and notice how the table lines up with the information in the class. So we have a ID field, which is an integer. We have a first name, which is text, a last name, which is text, a student number, which is text, a major ID, which is an integer. And notice this class, basically this ID field is what's going to reference the major table, which is defined up here. We also set a foreign key relationship. The major ID here references the major table ID field. So, and then on delete, we're going to, if we delete this major, this will just get set to null. So the next thing we need to do is create a repository. So remember, this is where we created all of our create, retrieve, update, and delete methods, our CRUD methods. So we're going to do the same thing here for the student. We're going to create a student repository. And our student repository is just like the other ones. We are going to inject a database service, and then we're going to use that database service to work with our database. Basically, that gives us our connection. And then we'll open up a connection to that database. And then the first get all uses select. And you can put a star, but I think it's actually kind of a good practice to list out the fields you're bringing in, because it makes it kind of a little clearer when we're using our reader. These index numbers, this tells you what the index is. So 0 is the ID, 1 is the first name, 2 is the last name, 3 is the student number, and 4 is the major ID. So having that list here in the order, make sure that the order lines up. If you were to change the table later on and switch the order up, this would still get these values in the right order. So, and then we're going to order by the last name. And yeah, so this should get all of our students. And then here we're doing a get by ID. Notice here we have, again, just like the other ones, we use a parameterized query to get the ID field, and you want to use parameterized queries with SQL and C#, because that will sanitize any inputs. That prevents the user from injecting code. It's maybe not as big a deal in the standalone application, but when you get to web development, it is critical that you avoid SQL injection. So use parameterized queries where you're putting a value from the user into the string, and then into the command. And then in here we're grabbing all those pieces and making a student class object, and that's what actually gets returned. If the reader doesn't have anything, if it's empty, it'll return a null. And then the add student, same thing. We're going to insert into student, first name, last name, student number, major ID, and again we're using parameterized queries, and we're taking the values from the student and putting them in here. You'll notice here also, we're checking to see if these are null. So this is a null checking operator. If this is null, it says you use the thing on the right instead. And db null.value, this is a variable provided for you that will return a properly formatted null for your database. If you just pass in a null, it may work. You may also get an error. So this is the safe way to put a null into your query. And then the update, same thing, except that notice that we have, with the update, you need the ID. And so we're using the student ID field, whereas with add, we actually ignore the ID field because the database will make the ID field. And then the delete just takes the ID, finds the one in the table, and then runs a delete. Now we should be ready to make a page. So we'll make our student page first. And I notice I didn't make a branch. I'm going to make one right now. And if you do make a branch later on, it'll ask if you what do you want to do with the changes. I'm going to bring them over, and that way my dev branch won't be affected so far. So now we're going to make this student page, and we're going to use a scroll view and a vertical stack layout. The scroll view will allow, if the page overflows the size of our window, it'll give the user the ability to scroll up and down. We're going to have a level at the top, and then we're going to have entries for the first name, last name, and student numbers. Notice the binding will bind to these attributes, and then we have a picker, which is a drop down, which is going to bind to the title of each of the majors. And then we're going to have a couple buttons, a save button and a cancel button. And let's see, we also need a couple methods. So let's add this. And then we will add to the code behind page. Oh, wrong one. I don't need that because I did this here. And let's see. Something seems a little bit off. Let me recreate this. I think there's a problem. Oh, I missed this. Okay, now it's running. There's just some issues with the name. Sometimes you get that because if it doesn't have these methods defined, you can get some issues. Okay, so I'm going to put in a series of methods to implement all of this. Now we're going to have two constructors for this page because this page is actually used to do two things. One, it's used to create a new student. And if it's a new student, you'll open this page using the default construct or the parameterless constructor, and it's going to just use the new student. If, on the other hand, you pass a student to the constructor, the form will then use this student that's passed in, and you'll see it's going to set the student variable to the existing student that's passed in. Both of these bring in a database, and then create the student repo. And then we're also going to create a major repo because we have a drop-down where you select what major the student is. So we need that as well in both these constructors. Now, is there a way we could do this and chain? Yes, actually. Let's see, we have load majors in both of these. We have binding context equals student. If student.major ID does not equal null, it'll pick it. And then we don't need these bindings here because we actually did that with in the page here by adding a clicked attribute. So then what we could do is we could say this, you know what, I'm just going to chain to and pass in a new student. Can I do this? No, it doesn't allow me to new up a student. I could pass in a null and then make this be nullable. Actually, let's do it this way. Actually, yeah, I should be able to do this. So we know that we're going to get into this with one of these two constructors. This one will create the new student. We can get rid of all of this then. And then this one will bring in the new student, and this avoids duplication. Now down here, the major ID will start off null, so it will ignore that. And so this should work fine. Then we're going to want a list view for our page. So we'll add another item, and I'm going to call it students page plural. And in this one, let's see, we don't need too many ending ones. Okay. In this one, we're going to have a text field at the top, a button, which is an add button, and then we're going to have a collection view where we're going to list all of the existing students. And we have a horizontal stack layout, which will show all the names left to right. And then we will have a edit button and a delete button. And notice that this one's singular and this one's plural. You could also say student detail or edit page and students list view page if you wanted that to be more explicit and easier to see. But I kind of think that works pretty nicely. And then in our code behind page, we have a constructor that creates our database in our student repo. And let's see, where'd that student repo end up? Oh, right up here. So we have the student repo up here. And then you can add the button click down there. I kind of prefer to put it up here. And then this on appearing is a lifecycle event, which means that when the page gets created, there are certain events that get called, and you can override those events when you want to have certain things happen. And so what we're going to do is we're going to run this load students that's going to go to a repo and get all the students and load our list view. And so the students collection view item source will be the list of students that we get back from our repository. And then if you click the add button, this is how we navigate in MAUI. This says push async student page. So this will push the student page. If we hit the edit button, which is located here on the row, it's going to push the student. So where do we get the student? We get the button from the sender. So the button that clicks it will be the sender. That gives an object reference. Now note that the reason why we're doing it that way is there's going to be multiples of these buttons up there. So we can't just have a name here and reference that one button. We need to get it from this sender. So this sender is a reference to the thing that caused this event to happen. And so we know that it's going to be a button. So we unbox this, we cast it to a button. And then what we do is, because it's a button, we can get the binding context. That's the data context that it's in, which if we look at this, will be the data context of this, the data source for this collection. And so you have to we can see that the students collection view right here, we set its item source equal to all the list of students. So each element of those lists of students is a student. And so that's going to so we know that that's going to be a student. We cast that to student. So that's the binding context of the row that this button is in. And then we can pass that to our student page, which will come in here through this constructor. So if we have no parameters, it creates a new student. If we provide a student, it will go to this one parameter constructor, and then we will go to the database, get that student, do everything. And then so this will actually allow us to edit that student in this detail page. So that's what's happening with that edit button. And then with the delete button, well, again, we're doing the same thing to find the student that we're referring to. And then we can use that student's ID field. The first thing we do is we display an alert. And this looks like this is a deprecated approach. We can probably switch to display alert at some point. Let's see. Yep. And so it'll wait for you to respond to this alert. It's going to ask you to confirm yes or no. And if you don't confirm, what will happen is we'll return out of this without deleting. If we do confirm, we'll go to the student repo and delete that student. And then we reload students after we do a delete in order to get the table back up to date. So now we have that. Then we need to be able to get to the students page. So we will go to our app shell and add that. And let's see if this works. So now we can go to student. I already had one in the database. I can edit and I can delete. There's the confirmation. So that gives us the ability to add students. And let's see, if we go to our majors and add a major, there's software developer, we can go to students and add a student. You can see now that's available. And we'll commit that. And then we can switch to dev and then you can merge that into the current branch. Thank you very much.